And now on the line is Eamon Rafter, the Learning Co-ordinator at the Glencree Centre for Peace and Reconciliation. Eamon, welcome to the programme.
Thanks. Good morning to you.
Hey, good morning. Eamon, I visited Glencree Centre for a couple of days in around 2002 or 2003 for a programme you had, but today is the first time for me to do a radio interview about the centre. Before we talk about your latest news in the centre, could you give our listeners, for those who don't know, a bit of a summary of what the centre is and a bit about your job in the centre?
Okay. Well, I suppose the first thing to say is Glencree was founded in 1974 as a response to the Troubles in Northern Ireland, and it developed over a period of time into an NGO working for peace and reconciliation. So the work that we have been involved in Glencree over a long number of years is really to try and offer a space and a process for people to both engage in dialogue with each other if they are perhaps people who are in who don't get on well with each other, or in conflict with each other, or even a place for learning about how people might be more actively involved in the whole process of reconciliation. So we have different programs that we run in order to achieve these aims. So we basically, what we're really about is supporting people to develop skills, but also then providing a dedicated place where dialogue can happen in a safe environment, in a confidential environment, and in a place where people will not be disturbed or have, people annoying them or interfering with what's going on. So we've tried to create that safe space in Glencree, and that's still a big part of what we do.
Do you still get visited much by people from Northern Ireland involved in the peace process, like politicians and former combatants and stuff like?
Sure. I think one of the big areas of work that Glencree would have pioneered back in in the period after the Good Friday Agreement was working with victims and survivors, which for us was very, very important because at some level they were people who may have felt themselves to be left out of the process, and their concerns were not maybe being heard, and even still that's something. So we would still be working in that area. We have also a community and political dialogue program, which again invites people from political parties, north and south, to come together and again discuss some of these issues. The former competence process was something that was very important in the early 2000s. Perhaps a little less so now, but I would still say, because people who are described as former combatants at this point are either reintegrated into society at some level, or they are not. And in which case, if they are not and are still advocates for violence, they're not people who want to work with us or people who will engage in non-violent peace and reconciliation work. So we do still work with former combatants, but we don't have a dedicated program in that area. But for sure, a lot of the participants coming to Glencree are from Northern Ireland. But nowadays, things are a bit different, and we have we have an intercultural program as well, and we work with, refugees and asylum seekers. So all our work has an all island or island of Ireland, north and south dimension. So so we participants coming from both north and south.
Yeah, when I was there, it was through a fellow I was in college with, Shane O'Connor. Do you know him?
Yeah.
A few of us from
Shane, was it?
Yeah, Shane O'Connor, yeah.
Oh, yeah, I know Shane well, yeah.
There was a few of us, we're in Closhadoolig and Coolock together at the college, and we went there for 2 days, and there were some loyalist prisoners there on a programme. And we were supposed to have a debate between an Ulster Unionist Party member and a Sinn Féin member, but the Sinn Féin fella didn't turn up, so we had a good discussion with the Unionist fella. The Ulster experienced fellow. I was talking to a loyalist prisoner as well. Yeah, I was looking at the Glencree website this morning and your profile on it, and you have a lot of very interesting work experience background, don't you? That stands to you in your job in Glencree.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I suppose I come from an education background, but I've worked in a lot of different areas of this, reconciliation work. So, I would have worked in programs that, look a lot at the past and, how people understand, their own story, their own history, their own narratives, and we've done a good bit of that work. But again, I would have done a lot of work as well with, on an international base. So we would have had groups coming from different places, from Palestine, Israel, from Afghanistan, and I've been in many of these places as well, and sometimes bringing groups out there, and then sometimes working with people in those contexts. So yeah, I suppose my experience is fairly diverse, but again, my focus remains very much on the role of education in this process, because I think, I strongly feel that education has a huge role. It's not the only thing, but it's one of the big areas where people might change their perspectives or, learn to work with difference, I think, a bit more productively, which is really what we have to do. Understanding the other is a very, very big part of our work. But we need to learn to do that.
I called you today for this interview because I know you have an information evening on Wednesday. But before we talk about that, could you just tell me a bit more about your intercultural program? Because I wasn't aware that you had that program.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, in recent years, the population in Ireland is much more diverse. And, traditionally there was a lot of interfaith work that would have gone on in Glencree, but it would have been, generally speaking, in the past more about people of different Christian persuasions or, ecumenical type of work. And that was very important in Glencree, I think. However, nowadays our work is really, we try very hard to include the diverse communities that are living in Ireland. And for example, there's a large Muslim community, and we've been working over the last few years to try and engage with that community. And I suppose it's partly to support integration, but it's also for people from the traditional community to have an engagement with these new communities. And again, that's part of peace building. It's part of developing a healthy society where people from different backgrounds, whether those backgrounds are faith backgrounds or whether they are ethnic or cultural, for people to have positive engagements together. And generally speaking, we feel that part of what's important for that is that people, when they meet in these contexts, that they feel the environment is safe and that the process is well supported. So really that's a big part of our role. When we invite people to come into that space, we have the responsibility then to ensure that the conversations are respectful and people get listened to and people get heard. So it's not necessarily about cozy agreement or anything like that. It's about people trying to develop understandings, and at the core, I suppose, of everything we do, there's an element of relationship building. So I think this is very important for new communities, that they feel understood. And at the same time, they want to be part of the society they're living in, and not a marginalised grouping. So again, we would think that that's an important role that we need to play in that, because we've seen in other countries how these things can go wrong and how they can be badly managed. We're a relatively small country, and we feel we can manage these things, but we need to address them, and we need to provide the space for people to have these conversations. So we did a piece of work in the last couple of years about supporting the Muslim community to access their rights as citizens living in Ireland. And and again, that's sort of work that we engage with a number of different partner organizations, because we like to work in partnership, and also we're trying to support people, for example, who are in the asylum process and who need to be actively somehow engaged with trying to, connect with people at the same time. So, that's the sort of area. We're kind of quite small resources to work in this area, but it's something that we feel it's important and we need to build on.
When you say you've been to Palestine and maybe Afghanistan, is that for Glencree?
Yeah, working with Glencree, yeah.
So,
we did a lot more international work. I'd say that, again, a lot of this is to do with funding, but, we would have had a kind of staffed international program, which we don't really have now, but we still try to focus on the international dimension. What have we learned about conflict in Ireland that maybe we could share with other places? Not to be directive or telling people what they should be doing, but just to offer some of our experience, more broadly. So that kind of work is we still do it, but again, not hugely resourced. We're a small organisation, and we do what we can. But in the past, we would have done, I think, quite a lot more of that, and also inviting groups who came to Ireland from different places who are experiencing conflict, and just to look at how things have been done here, but also meet with some of the, both political representatives, community representatives, and so on.
Yeah, I think it's very interesting when people visit the centre, like speakers and groups from abroad or from Northern Ireland or whatever, Okay, Eamon, can you tell me a bit about any interesting news you have now at the moment in the centre and planned over the next few months?
Yeah, well, we want to sort of, we did have a big peace education programme, which kind of, the funding for that ran out back in sort of about 2008, and we've continued to do peace education work, but we've done it on a fairly ad hoc basis, and we haven't really had a strong team of people working on it. What we now want to do is develop and expand our peace education program. So we want to invite in and build a core group of facilitators who will deliver workshops at different levels. Some of that would be at schools level, but others might be in a youth work context, or even at university level. So again, we're on Wednesday night, we're going to have an information evening just to invite people in to tell them a little bit about the work we do and what we're proposing to do in peace education. So we want to spend the next few months of this year trying to develop a team, and then gradually then over 2020 begin to sort of deliver a lot more structured peace education programs. Again, we're numbers hasn't been our focus in the last few years, working with huge numbers of people, because we just don't have the staffing to do that. But we feel that we could or should be working with a lot more people, and maybe try and get out some of the, share some of the background of the work that we've been doing, and help people develop some of those skills. Because again, one of the things that we've been noticing is that even within school context, there's very little opportunity to support young people, just to learn the basic life skills of how do we deal with conflict. And that can be, for example, having a difficult conversation, how do we manage that? Or, for example, working with emotions, like when people feel excluded, when they feel, or else when they feel irritated or angry about something, how do people work through these difficulties? And again, when we're faced with hostility from another person, how do we manage? So these are life skills, and they're part of the whole process of peace education. So peace education for us is it's about learning about conflict, but it's also learning to work with conflict in our own lives. So that's the kind of work that we want to develop and deliver to a wider extent. So we're hoping to engage a few more people in that work.
And if people go along on Wednesday, any of our listeners, and they do the course and they become a peace education facilitator, does that mean they're kind of representing the Glencree Centre
Well, they would be working with us. Yeah, I mean, obviously, we have to ensure that people have the ability to do the work. So, it just mightn't be something that everybody is ideally suited to. So we would hope that people would have some background in maybe either youth work, maybe it's non-formal education, and we will then support them, offer some training, so that we can deliver something that we're comfortable that the Glencree brand works well enough with. So yeah, it would be work. It would be Glencree work.
Okay.
And that's, it's very important to us that we deliver work that is, of a certain quality and of a good standard. So yeah, I mean, obviously there's room for different ways, different approaches, but we want to have a Glencree sort of mark on this.
Okay. And have you got much feedback as regards to Open
Wednesday?
Wednesday?
People have been registering. We have it up on Eventbrite, and people have been registering, and we're looking forward to having a good group of people. For us, it's not about having huge numbers. It's just if we got a few of the right people who were both interested in the work and have even done a little bit of this sort of work in the past, that would be great. But yeah, we're looking forward to having a good group on Wednesday.
Okay, and can you give out the contact details for it?
So basically, the easiest way to do this is go on to the Glencree Facebook page, and you'll see details there, and there's a link that will register you or connect you into Eventbrite. So I think that's probably the easiest way of doing it.
And the event is on in town, is it on Aungier Street?
It's in the Dublin Volunteer Centre at 5:30 on this coming Wednesday, the 25th, I think that is. Am I right? So 5:30, and that's the Volunteer Centre in Aungier Street. So yeah, we're looking forward to having a good evening.